Mornings with Will on 531 VI.
It is 16 minutes past 6 o'clock. Great to have your company this Tuesday. The Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters is keeping his cool in Washington ahead of his big meeting with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio tomorrow morning. Now, on President Trump's policy moves, Peters is staying pragmatic, focusing on how they impact New Zealand and the Pacific rather than passing judgment. Meanwhile, Rubio has been very busy on the global stage, recently helping to broker a potential ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. So it begs the question, what kind of meeting can we expect between Peters and Rubio? Well, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio's former Chief of Staff, Terrill, joins us now to discuss that and more on the Trump administration. Thank you very much for your time.
Hey, great to be with you.
Look, before we get into perhaps the specifics in terms of what we can expect from Rubio, I suppose the big question is just your assessment first on how you think the Trump administration is going.
Well, look, I think many Americans think that they're off to a good start here. President Trump is enacting the policies that he campaigned on. And, proof of that is in the data points. Over 70% of Americans believe that President Trump is delivering on what he campaigned on. So whether that's on foreign policy or domestic policy, American people recognize whether you agree with him or not, or like him or not, President Trump is enacting the policies that won in the last election, and we'll see where it all goes.
Certainly. Just a few points I'd like to pick up from your perspective. The tariff situation. Now, we've seen allies like Canada, traditional allies like Canada, come out swinging, effectively, slamming the tariffs. What do you make of it?
Well, look, no one should be shocked by these tariffs. President Trump campaigned on them. He enacted them in his first term. So, look, no one should be, shocked that these are being in place. But I think we have to take these tariffs just day by day because, look, I think President Trump views them as a negotiating tool, a way to negotiate with countries, a way to negotiate with companies. We've already seen some changes in terms of back and forth on the tariffs. And I think the reality is President Trump just views it as a way to negotiate. You saw that with Colombia. You saw it with Canada and Mexico. So I think for those who may not like these tariffs, the truth is we'll see what happens here down the road. I think we have to give this time. But I think they're a part of a bigger economic strategy that President Trump is deploying. And that's a strategy of transition. He's moving the United States away from growth in the public sector towards growth in the private sector. You saw that in the latest jobs report where the United States lost jobs in the public sector, but created jobs in the private sector. He's going to be deploying his tax cuts here, coming up here. And then furthermore, energy policy, other policies that he's pushing forward to get the economy roaring, to get inflation under control. We'll see what happens. But right now, this is a part of a multi-pronged approach in terms of his economic agenda.
Indeed. And look, and speaking of agenda, in some ways it's admirable in the sense of, that US first mentality that we're seeing coming out of the United States at the moment from the Trump administration. How do you think that is playing, though, on the foreign policy stage? I mean, it seems as though he's ruffling a few feathers with global leaders right across the globe. Although I'll say New Zealand, staying pretty, how can I put it, pragmatic.
Yeah, look, I think world actors, leaders, they should not be shocked by this agenda that President Trump is pushing forward. Every decision he's going to make is going to be America first. It's going to be how does it help to make America stronger, safer, more prosperous? And that's something he campaigned on. The thing with President Trump is he was very honest during the campaign trail about everything he was going to do, whether it's on domestic policy or on foreign policy. And so you're seeing that take shape here. But the truth is, President Trump is enacting a transition here. You're seeing that in terms of his economic agenda, moving the country away from public growth to private growth. But you're also seeing at the foreign policy stage, he's trying to get the United States to not have boots on the ground. He's not looking to wage wars. He's looking to enact peace. You're seeing that in terms of the Middle East. You're seeing it in terms of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. His goal is to negotiate with world leaders to get to peace in terms of the conflicts we're seeing on the global stage. So look, I think right now President Trump has a mandate. He won the last election with the popular vote, the Electoral College. He's got a mandate not just to enact the domestic policies that Americans care about, but obviously the foreign policy affairs that Americans care about as well.
You know the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, very well. What can we expect from this meeting with our Foreign Affairs Minister, Winston Peters? What kind of character is Rubio? Will he set the US agenda very clear with our Foreign Affairs Minister?
Well, first and foremost, he's very knowledgeable on foreign policy affairs. You saw that when he was a United States senator. I happened to, see that when he was a candidate for president in 2016. He is able and was able throughout his career and still is able to drill into foreign policy issues in a way that politicians and candidates in the United States of America traditionally, frankly, can't do. A lot of people can't do what he can do in terms of drilling deep into the foreign policy affairs of a nation. So I think going into this meeting, he's going to be prepared. He's going to know what he's talking about in this meeting. And then furthermore, I think what's expected this meeting is what the secretary is doing, but President Trump is doing the global stage, and that is being clear with world leaders about where they're at on trade, where they're at on key issues such as the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Middle East conflict, where they're at on China. We saw over the weekend here, President Trump launched attacks with respect to the Houthis, the Iranian-backed Houthis. So you're seeing a lot take shape here in the foreign policy stage. This is a different foreign policy stage when President Trump entered in his first term in the White House back in 2017. What you're seeing right now is a lot happening. That just means that Secretary Rubio has got a bigger job than you traditionally have, I think, in an administration as Secretary of State. We'll see what happens with this meeting coming up, but expect that he'll be prepared for the meeting and know the issues through and through.
Certainly. Do you think Secretary Rubio and indeed the Trump administration, dare I ask, cares enough about the Pacific region? The reason I ask that is in recent weeks, we've seen China's influence just continue to creep in and seep into the Pacific, inking deals with island nations that traditionally align with, say, the United States.
Well, look, I absolutely think they care. No question about that. And look, you brought up China. I mean, China policy is front and center for this administration. No question about that either. I also, though, think that we're to wait and see kind of what takes shape here. President Trump is not going to negotiate in the public. And a lot of the things we're seeing here, I think he'll be doing a lot of that behind the scenes. He's not going to show his hand, if you will, in many cases on what he plans to do. So in terms of what you're discussing, I think we have to wait and see how some of this all plays out in terms of the policy side of it. But there's no question that the United States is working on policy that is directly centered on China. And you're seeing that, of course, with what they've been doing around the Panama Canal. You're seeing it, frankly, with Greenland. You're seeing it with tariffs and trade. You're seeing it in a whole host of different areas. I think they absolutely care to answer your question, but I think we'll know more as we get along the way here in terms of the administration. They're not going to negotiate or do things in the foreign policy stage, always in the public. I think the proof of that can be seen in shuttle diplomacy taking place between Ukraine and Russia. A lot of the things they're doing on the foreign policy stage is behind the scenes, behind closed doors, but absolutely I think they care.
Final question for you. Winston Peters is often compared to the likes of Donald Trump in the sense that they both have similar sentiment and what they want to achieve. With that in mind, what kind of character can we expect with Rubio? Is he the type to have sparks flying behind closed doors?
Well, first of all, I think he's someone who is used to working with world leaders. I mean, this is someone who sat on the Senate Intel Committee, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So not only does he understand the issues facing the United States with respect to foreign policy or just foreign policy issues in general on the global scale, on the global stage. But look, he's used to working with world leaders. So this is not someone coming into this position new to it in terms of understanding how to operate and work with world leaders, how diplomacy works, the importance of diplomacy, negotiation. So I think you just expect that he's going to be someone who's honest, but at the same time, someone who's prepared, but also someone who is going to be there speaking on behalf of the Trump administration. At the end of the day, President Trump has surrounded himself with people, whether Secretary Rubio or other people in his administration who he trusts, respects, and knows. This is very different than Trump 1.0, where a lot of people around President Trump then President Trump didn't trust, didn't respect, didn't know. So to that end, people around President Trump, such as Secretary Rubio, he respects, trusts, and knows, and they will have President Trump's ear. But at the end of the day, it's President Trump calling the final shots. And so when a cabinet official is going into these meetings with world leaders, certainly they're going to have dialogue and they're going to have discussions and all those kind of things. But at the end of the day, they're representing the administration. And it's going to be President Trump ultimately setting the tone, setting the strategy, finalizing all of those things, whether it's with these upcoming talks or other talks taking shape with other world leaders. At the end of the day, President Trump is the one to watch in terms of what he does. Obviously, Secretary Rubio play a vital role in that, as he's been doing in multiple other scenarios around the world.
Certainly exciting times indeed. Matt Terrill, thank you very much for your time. You have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.